Friends and viewers, Charles Dickens, a very famous English writer and author of The Great Expectation, David Copperfield, Oliver Twist, A Bleak House, The Tale of Two Cities. He's the writer of all these famous novels, and today I'm going to discuss with you about one of his another famous novel, David Copperfield. David Copperfield, written by Charles Dickens. David Copperfield is a protagonist or a hero of this novel. A grown-up man tells the story of his youth. As a young boy, he lives happily with his mother and his nurse, Peggotty. His father died before he was born. During David's early childhood, his mother marries the violent Mr. Murdstone, who brings his strict sister, Miss Murdstone, into the house. The Murdstone treat David cruelly, and David bites Mr. Murdstone's hand during one beating. The Murdstone send David away to school. Peggotty takes David to visit her family in Yarmouth, where David meets Peggotty's brother, Mr. Peggotty, and his two adopted children, Ham and little Emily. Mr. Peggotty family lives in a boat turned upside down, a space they share with Mrs. Gumbridge, the widowed wife of Mr. Peggotty's brother. After this visit, David attends school at Salem House, which is run by a man named Mr. Creakle. David befriends and idealizes an egoistical young man named James Steerforth. David also befriends Tommy Treadles, an unfortunate fate young boy who is beaten more than others. David's mother dies and David returns home, where the Murdstone neglect him. He works for Mr. Murdstone wine bottling business and moves in with Mr. Micawber, who mismanage his fiancée finances. When Mr. Micawber leaves London to escape his creditor, David decides to search for his father's sister, Miss Betsy Trotwood, his only living relative. He walks a long distance to Miss Betsy's home, and she takes him in on advice of her mentally unstable friend, Mr. Dick. Miss Betsy sent David to a school run by a man named Dr. Strong. David moves in with Mr. Wakefield and his daughter Agnes while he attends school. Agnes and David become best friends. Among Wakefield's brother is Uriah Heep, a snake-like young man who often involves himself in matters that are none of his business. David graduates and goes to Yarmouth to visit Peggotty, who is now married to Mr. Barkis the carrier. David reflects on what profession he should pursue. So, on his way to Yarmouth, David encounters James Steerforth, and they take a detour to visit Steerforth's mother. They arrive in Yarmouth, where Steerforth and the Peggottys become fond of one another. When they return from Yarmouth, Miss Betsy persuades David to pursue a career as a proctor, a kind of lawyer. David apprenticed himself at the London firm of Spinlow and Jarkins, and takes up lodging with a woman named Mrs. Croup. Mr. Spinlow invites David to his house for a weekend. There David meets Spinlow's daughter Dora and quickly falls in love with her. In London, David is reunited with Tommy Treadles and Mr. Micawber. Word reaches David through Steerforth and that Mr. Barkis is terminally ill. David journeyed to Yarmouth to visit Peggotty in her hour of need. Little Emily and Ham, now engaged, are to be married upon Mr. Barkis' death. David, however, finds little Emily upset over impending marriage. When Mr. Barkis dies, little Emily runs off with Steerforth, who she believes will make her a baby. Mr. Peggotty is devastated but vows to find little Emily and bring her home. Miss Betsy visits London to inform David that her financial security has been ruined because Mr. Wakefield has joined into a partnership with Uriah Heep. David, who has become increasingly infatuated with Dora, vows to work as hard as he can to make their life together possible. Mr. Spinlow, however, forbids Dora from marrying David. Mr. Spinlow dies in a carriage accident that night, and Dora goes to live with her two aunts. Meanwhile, Uriah Heep informs Dr. Strong that he suspects Dr. Strong's wife Annie of having an affair with her young cousin Jack Maldon. Dora and David marry, and Dora proves a terrible housewife. Incompetent in her course, David loves her anyway and is generally happy. Mr. Dick facilitates a reconciliation between Dr. Strong and Annie, who is not in fact cheating on her husband. Miss Dartle, Mrs. Steerforth's ward, summon David and inform him that Steerforth has left little Amy. Miss Dartle adds that Steerforth's servant Litimer has proposed to her that little Emily has run away. David and Mr. Peggotty enlist the help of little Emily's childhood friend Martha, who locates little Emily and brings Mr. Peggotty to her. Little Amy and Mr. Peggotty decide to move to Australia, as do the Micawber, who first saved the days for Agnes and Miss Betsy by exposing Uriah Heep fraud against Mr. Wakefield. A powerful storm hits Yarmouth and kills Ham while he attempts to rescue a shipwrecked sailor. The sailor turned out to be Steerforth. Meanwhile, Dora falls ill and dies. David leaves the country to travel abroad. His love for Agnes grows. When David returns, he and Agnes, who has harbored a secret love for him, get married and have several children. David pursues his writing career with increasingly commercial success. So this is the story of the David Copperfield, written by Charles Dickens. And now let us come towards the theme of this novel, the theme involved in this novel. David Copperfield. The biggest theme which is involved in this novel is the plight of the weak. Throughout David Copperfield, the powerful abuse the weak and helpless. Dickens focus on orphans, women, and mentally disabled to show that exploitation, not pity or compassion, is the rule in any industrial society. Dickens draws on his own experience as a child to describe the inhumanity of child labor and debtor prison. His characters suffer punishment at the hands of forces larger than themselves. Even though they are morally good people, the arbitrary suffering of innocent makes for the most vividly affecting scene of novel. David starves and suffers in a wine bottling factory as a child, and his guardian, Mr. Murderstone, can exploit David as factory labor because the boy is too small and dependent on him to disobey. Likewise, the boy at Salem House have no recourse against the cruel Mr. Crackle. Another theme which is involved, the equality in marriage. In the world of novel, marriages succeed to the extent that husband and wife attain equality in their relationship. Dickens holds up the strong marriage as an example to show that marriages can only be happy neither spouse is subjugated to the other. Indeed, neither of the strong views the other as inferior. Conversely, Dickens criticized characters who attempt to invoke a sense of superiority over their spouses. Mr. Murdstone attempts to improve David's mother character, for example, only crush her spirit. So wealth and class is also involved in this novel. Throughout the novel, Dickens criticizes his society's view of wealth and class as a measure of person value. Dickens uses Steerforth, who is wealthy, powerful, and noble, to show that these traits are more likely to corrupt than improve a person's character. Steerforth is a treacherous, self-absorbed. On the other hand, Mr. Peggotty and Ham, both poor, are generous, sympathetic characters. Many people in Dickens' time believed that poverty was a symptom of moral degeneracy, and people who are poor deserve to suffer. So this is the theme of the David Copperfield involved in this novel by Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens is no doubt was a great writer, and is a great. His name will remain forever in the history of English literature. David Copperfield, a protagonist, the narrator of this novel. David is innocent, trusting, naive, even though he suffered abuse as a child. He is idealistic and impulsive, and remain honest and loving. Though David's troubled childhood renders him sympathetic, he is not perfect. He often exhibits chauvinistic attitude towards lower classes. In some instances, foolhardy decision mark David's good intention. Agnes Wakefield, David's true love and second wife, the daughter of Mr. Wakefield. James Steerforth, a condensing, self-centered villain from his boyhood. Clara Peggotty, David's nanny and caretaker. Peggotty is a gentle and selfless, opening herself and her family to David whenever he is in need. She is faithful to David and his family all her life. Little Emily, Peggotty's unfaithful niece, who is sweet but also coy and vain. Uriah Heep, a two-faced, cunning villain who puts on the false show of humility, meekness to disguise evil intention. Miss Betsy Trotwood, David's eccentric, kind-hearted aunt. Dora Spinlow, David's first wife and real love. Mr. and Mrs. Wilkins Micawber. Tommy Traddles, Clara Copperfield, David's mother, Mr. Edward Murdstone and Miss Jane Murdstone, cruel second husband of David's mother, Mr. Peggotty, Dr. Strong and Annie Strong. These are the characters involved in this novel. Ladies and gentlemen, David Copperfield is one of the included among the best novels of Charles Dickens, like Great Expectation, Oliver Twist. David Copperfield is also one of the same, like Pickwick Paper, Hard Times, Nicholas Nickleby. These are the outstanding novels written by Charles Dickens, and Dickens' name will remain forever in the history of English. Thank you very much.